Dennis, thank you for joining me here for the community
Hello.
conversation. For those of you who don't know Dennis, he is one of our pull request and issue managers. He works with Razvan, who we saw here in the last episode of the community conversations. And you've been now, this is your second year, I think, in the position, or is it your third? It's your
Yes,
second. Yeah.
I think
And
my third year has just started, and I've had 2 years now.
all right, yeah, so you've completed two already. Yeah, I get my dates all mixed up. Now, we're going to get to the pull request and issue manager stuff, but before that, we're going to start at the beginning. And we don't have to go all the way back to your infancy, but we will start with your neophyte programming days. Now, in 2022, you gave a talk at DConf, and in that you gave a little bit of an introduction to your programming background, and you talked about how you started programming in GameMaker.
That's right.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about GameMaker. How old were you then? What, about 10, 11, something like that?
Yeah, I was 11 years old, probably. It was 2008, I think. And a friend showed me this program in which you could create your own games, and it was really easy to get started. You didn't have to start writing code. You just had to drag and drop some actions. And it also had a scripting language. So I saw on like the forum that I was active in at the time, a tutorial how to convert from the drag and drop building blocks to actual just written programming code. And that was my first introduction to like real variables, if statements. And the GameMaker language is syntactically also very similar to C and Java, so with the same bracket styles. So that's kind of how I started with code.
And you said in that talk that when you used the GameMaker language, GML, you liked it because all the code does something.
Yes,
And
that's right.
and you compared it to, for example, Java, where not all the code does something. So can you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, I really like the pragmatic philosophy. So when I first read things about, uh, first saw the word void somewhere in a shader language or something. Was like, what does it mean? And then you look it up. It says, oh, it means it doesn't return anything. But I'm like, why do I have to specify what it doesn't do? I just want to write the code that tells what my game does do. But yeah, at university, I later, became familiar with more advanced programming concepts, and then it became more clear what all these, more abstract constructs were useful for. But
Mm-hmm.
still, what I like about GameMake language and also D is often a bit of a pragmatic approach where at first you might say, wait, you cannot do that. It's not that simple. And we're like, yes, it is. Yes, you can. Just do it.
Well, you also said that another thing that you liked about it was that it was just very easy to distribute because you got the game in a single executable. And later, now you used GameMaker for about 7 years or so before you started getting into other languages. And one of those other languages you got into was C++. And one of the things you didn't like about that was that you had to distribute like DLLs with the game.
Yes.
And why was that important to you? Why was it important to you to have everything in a single distributable package?
Well, with GameMaker, you could export an executable and just send it to your friend, and he could double click it and open it and run it. And that's just, there's a very low tolerance for installation of your game's player base. Like
Mm-hmm.
they don't want to install external software. They don't want to download and then see, oh, Java runtime is missing. I have to install that and go through these crappy installation programs, which at the time also try to install bloatware. That's just poor user experience. And the best user experience, like except for embedded in the browser, which I didn't know how to do at the time,
Mm-hmm.
was download executable, double click it, and run it without any errors or dependencies or chances where it could go wrong. And so when I tried in C++, I needed a windowing library, so I chose GLFW. But then I could install GLFW on my PC, but then people who don't have it, if I send the executable to them, it will give a linker error, and that's poor user experience. So I wanted to. I also didn't want to like have an installer program that then extracts all these DLLs and dependencies, and it leaves a mess. It's like when you deinstall, there's always some traces of it behind, and your computer gets slowly filled with old installations. So yeah, I was just really attracted to that simple experience of, oh, here's the game in one file. Double click to open it, delete it to delete it. And when I try to do some simple things in C, like, oh, I just want to embed the DLL in the executable, or even just I want to read a file into memory, I saw that you had to do multiple steps like fopen and then fseek to the end, allocate amount, fseek to the beginning, and like, why isn't there just a function for that? And then when I started learning D, I saw, hey, they have a import statement which just embeds a file. Hey, they just have in the standard library a read function which just does the obvious thing, which is exactly what I was looking for. So I was like, hey, this D language doesn't look so bad.
Yeah. Well, I don't think it's just gamers who are reluctant to install things. I think it's Windows users in general. I mean, I say that as a longtime Windows user. Yeah, I remember in the early days of D, when we got 64-bit support on Windows, people were reluctant to install MSVC. If they were already using, MingW or something like that. So, but what about you? How are you on installing dependencies? I mean, were you just thinking in terms of people you send the file to, or are you like that too? I mean, how are you with installing extra stuff?
Yeah, so I don't like installing extra stuff myself, and I figure others also don't. So yeah, so currently I'm using Linux, so it's far easier with just a package manager.
Right.
But still, like when I build something on Linux and it doesn't work because I should have, opt get install or pacman as, and a package, like, that's just extra steps. Why do I need to do this? You don't need my input on this. Just don't waste my time. Let me just run the thing.
Just get it and go. Yeah. Well, let's just rewind just a little bit, because I didn't ask you what got you into GameMaker in the first place. I mean, was it just all about the desire to make games, or were you interested in programming itself? What was it that got you there?
It was mostly the creative part, because before that I already had, like, I made some animations in MS Paint and some stick figure animations in Pivot and some stop motion, like stuff like that. And I think I was just drawn to that kind of stuff, creating stuff, so it lasts, longer than just performing once and then no one remembers it. I like recording things and creating things, and games was like a natural extension of that. When you make movies and sounds, then hey, a game is like a bunch of sounds and pictures, but some interactivity as well.
Well, okay, that's kind of surprising to me, because in having worked with you now for so long, it surprises me to hear that you have this creative side, because I don't see that in your work on the D Foundation. To me, you're like a typical, engineering kind of nerd, right? Like Walter, I wouldn't have expected you to be. Is that still there, that creative side of you, or is it?
Yeah, like the thing is, the D language basically sidetracked a lot, because I made, like, I think my last I made some Game Jam games, but my last Game Maker game was 2016, and since then I wanted to continue, because that last game was like pushing the limits of Game Maker. It was 3D, but Game Maker is not made for 3D, and it ran on my PC, but on other PCs it started lagging, and I couldn't really optimize it further as far as I could tell. So I needed a better language, so I wanted to switch to C++, and then I found that's annoying. Then I found, hey, there's D, but there I got involved with a lot more stuff, other sides, and now I'm developing the compiler. So I'm still trying to trying to write a game in D, but yeah, there's so many projects, and yeah, I hope to get back to it soon.
Yeah, I think that's how I got into D too. It was graphics programming and games programming, and I can't remember the last time I did any of that stuff, right? So I think that happens to a lot of people who start contributing. That sounds like a bad advertisement, actually. Maybe we shouldn't say that. Yeah. So you, you get into uni, you start using all these other languages. But before you found D, what was your preference? What language was your preference before you found D?
I think Java, simply because, for my university courses, I became familiar with it. So it was just the thing I knew.
Mm-hmm.
And I always had in the back of my mind, oh, but I rather be familiar with C++ or a compiled language. I didn't like the interpreted. I just wanted to be no extra layers between the metal and my program, like no unneeded layers. I felt like the whole JVM thing, it just costs performance and it doesn't provide that much. Yeah.
Yeah, I understand that because Java was I started using Java in '98. I think it was like Java 1.1 or something, and that's where it got its reputation for being slow. Was back during that era, and I think it got better performance later on. But yeah, I was pretty interested in Java for a while until I found D, and D just kind of pulled me in. And I love hearing how people discovered D for the first time. It's always there's so many different stories from it, and for you, it was on a benchmark website.
Yes.
Talk about that.
I was curious what the difference between the speed of Java and C++ was. Like, how much does the VM layer actually cost in performance? And so I looked for a benchmark, and I found a site which listed multiple languages, including D, and it was right there up with C and C++ at like almost as fast as C. And I was like, hey, that sounds very promising. And the name really helped. I know D isn't always like the best name for maybe Google ability or something, but in this case, it did really immediately draw me to, hey, I want a successor or a better C. That sounds great. That sounds something I want. So, and I went to check it out. Now, my first impression from the homepage was not that great, though, because the examples were all like functional style. And I was like, oh, this is more like a Haskell style. This is not C. But later I discovered, well, that's one aspect, like the Phobos ranges, but there's also just your tried and true if statements and for loops and even the for each, which is better. So then I got attracted to D again. But there were also periods where, because I wasn't that familiar with linking, and static linking on Windows has all these caveats and troubles. So I got a lot of issues and things didn't work out of the box. So then I tried, C# for a while, see if that was something. But then it eventually came back to D because C# had its own annoyances, and also, of course, it's also a language with a runtime, and or with a, how do you say? It's not a native language. There are native compilation tools for C++, C#, but yeah, I don't remember the details. But eventually, I came back to D.
Yeah, these days the borders are so blurry now between scripting languages and bytecode languages and statically compiled languages. You can do it all with all of them these days to some degree. I think that I remember I was kind of scared away by the D website, but that it wasn't because of the functional programming that didn't exist in D at the time. It was because it looked so old. But the original and the old one. But yeah, there was a quote that I took from your DConf talk about when you discovered D. It's like, oh, they made a sequel to C++. I love that. That's what it looks like. Yeah, if you don't know anything about D, oh, what is this? This is the next C++. Yeah, so in that time period, so, okay, so leading up, by the time you discovered D, about what year was this?
2018, I think.
Okay, so you'd basically been programming for 10 years or so by then. What did you find? Why did you keep? Well, I guess you kept doing it because you were still wanting to create. But what did you find? What attracted you to the act of programming itself, aside from creating it? What did you discover along the way that you enjoyed about programming? Because obviously you did. People who don't enjoy it don't stick with it. So what did you find that kept you doing it?
That's a good question. I think I like mathematical models a bit. I like when systems are predictable. Like when you write a news article or something like that, then it's really hard to predict how people are going to receive that. Are they going to get the context? Are they, do they read your words as you meant it? But with a computer, there are clear rules about the computer is going to interpret these words like this. And if you make a mistake, it's on you. It's never like, oh, but you didn't understand what I said. Like, no, I made the algorithm wrong, so it doesn't work or doesn't run well. And if I make a really great algorithm, it runs well, and there's this whole systemic thinking is really appealing to me.
For me, I always liked the high level view. It's not so much the problem solving or the algorithmic thinking. It's the high level view of putting the pieces together to form a whole program. That's what I always enjoyed about it. And in fact, I never really actually enjoyed the low level programming aspect of it, but as much. I mean, I didn't hate it per se, but I was always attracted to the high level part of it. But so you get into D, and it's 2018. At what point did you decide to start contributing, or how did you start contributing? What was your first contribution in terms of code?
Don't remember my exact first contribution, but I do remember just wanting to get into the internals of the compiler, which I had some attempts where I just started reading the source code, but it was very hard, a lot harder than Phobos, for example. But yeah, eventually I started fixing some simple, I think, error message issues. And then it was DIP 1000 which was like my introduction to real bug fixes and core contributions, because I really like DIP 1000, like the safe stack memory. I like safe programs. So first of all, I always want to write my code in such a way that you cannot accidentally delete a line or move a line and then it still compiles, but it has critical memory safety error bugs. I want the compiler to catch all the basic mistakes. Like, it cannot interpret like the intention, of course, but basic memory issues should be caught at compile time, and other issues as well. And DIP 1000 was a way to provide that for stack memory. But then I found that there were severe bugs in it where the compiler would take valid code and wrongly optimize things on the stack, introducing memory corruption, which was really terrible. So I felt like, oh, something should be done about this. So I looked into it, and I went down to a whole rabbit hole of issues where, lots of existing code relied on those bugs. And also, when you fix a bug, you find another bug in the process. So yeah, I really started fixing a lot of those bugs and expanded from that later on, because then you get familiar and then you feel like more comfortable tackling other issues as well.
Well, at the beginning of what you just said, you mentioned that you were interested in the compiler internals. Did I hear that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Where did that come from? Do you know? I mean, because that's a very different thing.
No, like, it's been a while. I really don't know what made me think like, oh, I should try to, get into it. But I mean, I think it's a bit, when your issues don't get solved, I really don't. This is another example of me liking to just not depend on other people, but well, if it's, I put it in the issue tracker, maybe people don't care or understand, but I can edit the code and the compiler will then just do the right thing now. So I felt like, well, if these issues are, if there's not enough capacity, not enough interest for existing maintainers to, fix the bug shortly, then I'll chime in and try to help out there.
And did you have any experience before with compilers? Did you take any compiler courses at uni or anything like that?
I did have a compiler course at the university, but it was a very theoretical one, not a pragmatic one. And I think it was also around the same time that I got familiar with DMD, so I could really see the two approaches. Like in DMD, I read Walter's blog posts about how identifiers were interned, meaning that they just compare pointers instead of comparing strings, which is very optimized. But the compiler course wasn't about that at all. They were using a linked list for the symbol table, and I was like, "Wow, that's so slow!" But like they weren't interested in the the large programs, like handling it efficiently. They were just more interested in proving that your semantics are correct and more formal analysis and stuff.
Right. That's interesting. So you start contributing, and what did it ever come to your mind that you would start working with the core team?
No.
Yeah. You weren't, it wasn't something you were aspiring to. You were just contributing as a user.
Yeah, I think I was really focused on my my studies, and I'm not thinking very far ahead. So I've never really known, like, oh, after my studies, I'm gonna pursue this career, like probably something with programming because I've done computer science, but didn't really picture something very clearly. And when I already knew, like, D isn't very popular amongst, like, there aren't very jobs in D, like more popular languages like C++ and Java. I'm probably going to end up working in that. But then I saw like the pull request manager position open up. I was like, hey, that seems very interesting. And so I just started doing that. I applied for that and I got it. So
so that was just because you thought it was interesting. It was just an opportune moment then.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. And so when you got into this pull request and issue manager position, did you know what you were getting into? Were you clear about what the job entailed?
Yes, pretty much, because at that point I've already been fixing bugs, and I've even been like in the DMD strike team, which was an initiative of Razvan, like back when he was the only one. He already recruited me for like the DMD strike team for help fixing DIP 1000 issues.
You know what? I completely forgot about that. I remember it now that you mentioned it, because he and I had talked about it. Why don't you describe what that was for everybody? I wish I'd remembered that last month when I talked to him. I could have asked him about it. Yeah.
Yeah, the strike teams were an effort to make contributions more organized, which is something we've been trying to do over last couple of years with various attempts. And the idea was that we have specific people who you can approach for specific issues. So if someone has an issue with DIP 1000 that would get on my lap or something. And I think there was also a Phobos strike team for contributors who are more familiar with Phobos, etc.
Yeah, and as I recall, they were all volunteers who Razvan had reached out to.
Wrangle. volunteers because there's no fixed times. It's kind of like, oh, you're in the mood to contribute. Well, I'll contribute, and you can't really command someone, hey, volunteer, go do this now. So
Yeah.
it's always
So
a hard issue.
so as I remember, the idea was that you're just basically on call, and if it was an early attempt to have a way for volunteers to have a high impact on the things that we needed done. Yeah. So I
I
don't
think it was
remember.
also meant to lower the communication, like what should I work on?
Right.
It's kind of hard if everyone individually would contact Walter or something at the same time. It would overflow his mailbox. So the idea was that it was kind of like, kind of an interface layer between the core team and volunteers.
And so you had already had experience pretty much working with Razvan to some degree. So when you get into this pull request manager, issue manager position, what was the workflow like in the beginning?
Started with just going through the open pull request list for the specification and merging or reviewing and addressing a lot of the stalled PRs in that queue. And then I just started reviewing the other pull request queues as well and started fixing issues. And there's no real orders from higher up or management. I'm not being micromanaged, so I have a lot of freedom in what I do, and that's also hard for me sometimes. I sometimes like if there's a clear structure, like, oh, let's try to get this done by this date. Otherwise, I always do the easy things first, and then the kind of harder things just get postponed every time. Yeah, so that's something I'm still improving on or working on, trying to plan and have more intentional. Like what I'm trying to do now is set goals for this release. I want these features in, or these bugs fixed, or these pull requests merged. So that gives a bit of a window so that I can say, like, oh, it's getting closer. I should work on this now and not keep doing the easy stuff or the unrelated stuff.
How did you feel in communicating with the team? Because I remember when I first started working with the foundation, mostly I was just working with Andre and Walter. And my interactions were mostly with them. And this was a very, very, very new experience for me because I had been basically a freelancer for 20-something years by the time I started working for them. I was always in charge of my own schedule, and I never had any bosses, anybody that I answered to directly during that time. And, it had been years since I worked in an environment with bosses. And so I came into this expecting that they were going to be managing me, but they weren't. And I should have been very comfortable with that because I was a freelancer, but it felt very uncomfortable for me in the beginning because I kept thinking, oh my gosh, this isn't just me. I've got this responsibility for this. I'm getting more and more responsibility for all this stuff now. It took me a while to adapt to that freestyle of working, and I wasn't sure how to communicate with Andre and Walter. How forcefully should I push my ideas? How much should I defer to them? I mean, especially given Andre's status as a C++ guru, and I just it took me a little while to adapt to that, even at my age. I was 40 something at the time. So it was a completely new world for me. How was it for you getting into that, and not just the work itself, but in communicating and pushing your ideas and that kind of thing?
Yeah, so I've already been active in the forums and in the GitHub discussions. So on text, I've already communicated a lot with various core members.
Well, communicating is oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Yeah, I think you're about to say what I was going to. Yeah.
So on text, you have all the time to prepare and double check all your points, and then when you get in a video call, suddenly it's a lot harder to you don't have that much time to answer. So often, and also you see the other, so you're a lot more compassionate. So it feels different. Like you can really be the raging internet, have a raging internet discussion in text, but then in a video call, like it's a lot harder to really get angry and get into a flame war. I feel it's a lot more polite. So, and also a lot, harder that way because you have less time to formulate all your thoughts. So, but yeah, it is nice to have instant feedback and immediately like response, because these text conversations can often derail into tangents and it will overshadow the main points. And so yeah, it was kind of new thing to start communicating in like a video call. But other than that, yeah,
Yeah,
it didn't feel that much difference. I didn't feel that like pressure, like, oh no, I now have a boss over me. I'm like, yeah.
Well, that's the thing. I didn't feel like the pressure that I had a boss over me. I felt like I should feel that pressure, but I wasn't feeling it. And that was what was so awkward for me. And so I would always, anytime, I didn't do it for every little thing, but anytime I was about to do something that needed a decision that I thought was a little bit, bigger than me, I would always email Walter and Andre or Andre about it and, get their feedback. And after a while, I realized, well, they're just giving me the green light every time. I might as well just go ahead and start doing this stuff. And it just, then everything fell away. And yeah, so it's just, it's so many years of being my own boss. It was just a weird transition.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing where sometimes you're in this big conundrum, like, oh, how to deal with this? And then you ask Walter or Andre or someone, and they give a real simple answer. And they're like, oh, it's, I was feeling so, confused, and they gave such a simple answer. It doesn't have to be this hard or complex.
What changed for you? I mean, your perspective as a D user being versus your perspective as being a member of the core team. What is your perspective about D? What changed making that shift? Or did anything change? Do you still see everything the same way as you did as a user?
My view on the D language has shifted, but I'm not sure if it's because of like my position. It's mostly just when I started out, I was excited by all these fancy features, like, oh, you have these string mix-ins and these templates and magic. And as you go on, you start to see the downsides of complex and novel features, and you're like, oh, actually just the simple features, the arrays, the enums, the structs, those are much nicer to work with.
Mm-hmm.
And so at the beginning, I was also very passionate about adding new features to D, and more I'm more passionate about just stabilizing it, make it faster, make the tools better, and not adding a lot of features to it. I just also try to limit my own code more and more to a smaller subset of D.
Mm-hmm.
Like really try to not use advanced features if I can also use the simple features. I really like that the advanced features are there for prototyping, refactoring, experimentation. But in like my final version, I don't want alias this, for example, in my production, in my finalized code. I rather have explicit accesses or stuff like that. But it is a good refactoring tool. But yeah, I don't think my perspective. Well, one thing about being a developer is that like what parts of the compiler are more robust than the others. So I know, some users encounter lots of bugs and I don't, but probably because I know what are the buggy areas, what are things to avoid.
Mm-hmm.
So, and yeah, it does give a bit of a biased view where I think, oh, this D feature is fine. And it's fine for me because I know the D language and the compiler so well. But for an outside programmer, when I think about them, it's like, oh, for example, Dip 1000, by now I'm really familiar with it. So it's really hard when people say like, oh, it's too confusing. I'm like, could be. I don't know. I know it so well now. I don't know how it feels to be new to all this stuff. So it's hard to, think about how to make it less confusing. Then I have to like be a novice again and shift my perspective. Yeah.
Yeah, I think for me, I became more concerned about as a user, sometimes, not often, but sometimes, when somebody was being, ridiculous in the forums or something, I might give a snarky reply or something like that, right? And I realized one day I can't do that anymore because, for a while I was still thinking of myself as a D user, but then I realized one day, well, suddenly I'm not just a D user anymore. I'm a member of the foundation team, and so anything I say now is going to be, put into perspective as, oh, well, somebody from the D Foundation said this. So that was a big change for me. So I can't tell you how many times I've bit my tongue at the keyboard, wanting to say something and didn't say it. But that comes with the territory.
Yeah, I can feel the same with I don't like. I try to not use snarky tones anymore, but especially now that I have like the foundation member role, I'm less, it's what you say, like you can be snarky or really condescending, or not that I wanted it to be, but now I'm extra careful about it.
Yeah, you got to really think about what you say, and that's why I also at times in the past wanted to be informative and tell people what we're talking about and what oh we're going to do this and then suddenly we end up not doing that somewhere down the road, and I'm like, oh gosh, so there are times I just like, should I announce this yet? Should I wait? Where are we? So there's a lot that goes into that. How has your role evolved since you first started? I mean, when you first started, I think it was just about, fixing issues and that kind of thing. How have your responsibilities changed since you took on the PR manager role? You don't just manage PRs anymore or fix issues.
But I think it never was like fully about only reviewing pull requests. Like it was all clear from the start for me that I was, there are not, like the limiting factor isn't always the amount of reviews on pull requests. It's also often just the amount of pull requests created. So at some periods there might be some pull requests needing review, but most often like every pull request is either reviewed or waiting on the author of the pull request to make changes. And in that case, you have to be more proactive and find some other ways to get things going, such as fixing issues yourself or updating the documentation of the contributor guide or making YouTube tutorials. Like try to make it more approachable actively.
Right. Yeah, I think, I guess the role had already evolved by the time you got into it. It had already evolved from the beginning. I mean, it was always about pull requests and issues in the beginning, fixing bugs sometimes or finding people to fix the bugs. But, Razvan, I guess, kind of carved out this niche for himself beyond that. How are you two different? You don't... Are you doing the same kinds of things in this role, or are you approaching it differently, or do you know?
I don't know exactly how Razvan approaches it, but I feel we are doing the same with just, on the one hand, having the more reactive, watching the pull request queue and reviewing pull requests as needed. And on the other hand, looking for issues and fixing them yourself. And for example, Razvan is busy with DMD as a library, and I have been busy with Dip 1000 and recently named arguments and other stuff. So I think we're doing the same strategy, just different topics. Obviously,
Right.
not working on the exact same issue.
Right. Well, is there ever a time where you look at like a bug that needs fixing and you think, oh, this was better suited for Razvan than me? Does that ever happen? Or
Um, I
I
don't
guess not.
think so.
Yeah, I was just wondering if you guys are
Like
like,
you just pick the bugs based on how easy or how easy it is to solve. Because there are a lot of bugs where it's very clear, oh, there is, in this specific instance, the compiler does this thing, it should do that thing. So just change that, add a test case, submit, and it gets through. It's like, and we can both do that. We can both just see those trivial issues and be like, okay, let's just quickly get this over with. And then there's all the larger issues with more nuanced things like, oh, what is it would be a breaking change or new addition, and is it really worth it? And it makes this part better, but this part worse. And those are the issues where sometimes, like, Razvan has better judgment in his areas, and I have better judgment in my areas, and also other people like Walter has his own, expertise, of course, in many parts, like especially the back end and import C. Like that's where Walter can really has the insights.
well, a little earlier you mentioned named arguments, and that your work on that came about because we had these unimplemented approved dips that hadn't been implemented, and so you were asked. Well, I think we asked for volunteer between you and Razvan to implement them, and you volunteered to do it. Why? Why did you decide to take that on? And how was it for you? I mean, did you enjoy it?
Well, the difficult part is that the DMD code base is so large and it uses argument lists in so many places. And in all those places, it really is hardwired that there's just a single list of expressions. And all those cases need to be accounted for, all those rewrites. I even, when implementing, I sometimes forgot where a case I had to look for all those instances, like, oh, UFCS, that needs to account for named arguments, but then there was the struct constructor rewrite that I forgot, and so their named arguments were discarded. That's more of an implementation thing. So it's hard because there's so many places to update, but it's also a chance for me to get familiar with all those places. So I haven't looked at the template instantiation code for ever, basically. But for named arguments, I needed to make those work with implicit template function instantiation. And then I had to dive into that template code. And now I've done that, I could improve, for example, error messages with template instantiation and, get more bugs, fix more different kinds of bugs myself. And I think that's what draws me to, tackle named arguments, because I just expand my knowledge and my territory that I'm familiar with in the compiler. So just by picking up various different bugs or features or things to implement, you slowly get more and more acquainted with the whole code base.
What would you say is the most challenging problem you faced so far in this position? What was it? Implementing named arguments, or was it a particular bug that you had to solve?
Technically hard?
Sure.
Thing?
Yeah. The most challenging technical problem, sure.
That's really hard to say, because I think the hardest part is to split things up in manageable chunks. Often when you try to do everything at the same time, it's just too much. You just cannot handle it all at the same time. I think the hardest thing was with DIP 1000, how there are so many special cases in the existing code and so many existing decode relying on all those special corner cases. And I think what's really hard there was just trying to untangle the mess while keeping everything in a working state. Because it's easy to just break everything and try to work up from scratch, but there's a good chance that it doesn't work out, and then you're getting stuck. So what you then have to do is small steps, trying to fix one small thing and make sure everything works, and one more small thing, and progress goes really slow. But when it's a complex task, that's the only way.
So,
Or I don't know a better way. But
okay. So, what I think I don't know what to make of the fact that you didn't have like a serious, like you remember this bug that made you pull your hair out when I asked that question. Do you think that how? I guess what I'm trying to get at
often
is
when a bug is too hard, I kind of just give up for a while and try something else. So it's not like I would probably have more of a horror story if I was really forced, like, oh, this had to be done before this date and I just couldn't manage it. But often when it's really hard, I just go work on something else and hope next week or next month, give it another try and see
okay.
how far we come then.
So you have
So that's kind of
encountered.
why I avoid doing something really monstrous.
Yeah, I see. Because I didn't want to give the impression that maintaining DMD is easy. So, yeah, we've had some big decisions to make sometimes in our meetings, like how to like the refactoring, how to go about the refactoring and all that other stuff. Have you been involved in that at all, the actual refactoring, or is that just Razvan?
I have done refactoring, not specifically for like extracting the semantic functions from the AST nodes.
Mm-hmm.
So but I have done refactoring with, for example, the backend, making sure it uses imports instead of the old-fashioned C extern function declarations.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, I remember that. Yeah, I remember when you did that. Okay, so in our recent meetings, we've been talking about additions, DMD as a library, built-in LSP server, compiler as a daemon, all kinds of cool stuff that we're working towards. What is most interesting to you? What's got you most excited of all the new stuff coming our way down the road?
Well, I'm excited about the language server, although it's also the one where it feels like there's the most work that needs to be done. Like it's still far way out before it's really getting there.
Mm-hmm.
But I am excited that it's moving in that direction.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think mostly that, because I think that's currently my biggest issue with D is just the tooling. You just want a reliable go-to definition, rename. Like that's the thing that's taking a lot of time, manual refactoring or searching for uses. And if that's can be done automatically, it would be really killer. I think I'm already sometimes just hacking the compiler to print out some functions or uses of something as I need it. But those hacks aren't generally usable. You just want working language server for every D user.
Mm-hmm. And what is something that we're not working on that you'd like to see, or that we haven't discussed that you would like to see? Language feature or tooling, or what is something that you feel we're missing?
I think nothing that we haven't already mentioned. I would really like proper WebAssembly support, but we've already mentioned that. But I think the problem is we don't have a champion for it currently.
So everything we've discussed then is basically you're on board with that.
Yeah, because if there's something I really want, I'll bring it up and then it gets discussed. I think I brought up WebAssembly a couple of times. So,
well,
and also faster compile times, which I also brought up, and Attila as well. So it's always nice to have.
So another thing that has arisen from your role, something that wasn't part of it originally, but kind of naturally fits in as the PR issue manager, is I guess I don't want to say managing contributors, but maybe interacting with contributors, interfacing with contributors, onboarding contributors. And this is something that we've discussed before. And you did allude to YouTube videos earlier. You did some tutorials on how to contribute to the compiler. What more do you think we need to do to make it easier for new contributors to onboard?
I think the build process needs to be easier for the runtime. I think at this point, building the compiler is relatively easy, but the runtime and the standard library are still a huge clutch of make files and giant commands. I think there should just be a simple command for it, because I've seen several contributors tell me like, oh, I want to port the runtime to this, new hardware, this new obscure gaming console or just embedded system.
Mm-hmm.
And they're getting stuck with, working with the current runtime is so messy that they just start from scratch with minimal object.ds. And I wish we could just have make it easier to change the runtime. Yeah.
Mm. Okay, so from that side, you're talking about in terms of code and code contributions. What about process?
Yeah, so I don't know. Well, there are some things in the process that are really annoying, like the CI. When you open a pull request, the CI is slow, flaky, and has unclear errors. It would be nice if opening PR quickly you would see this is wrong with it or this is failing.
Mm-hmm.
Currently, errors are often buried in a giant log of commands, or there are spurious, unrelated errors,
Mm-hmm.
which are just because of flaky setup. So those really slow contributors down. And also, opening pull requests on GitHub is a bit hard. I'm used to it now, but I do understand that there's not much we can do about the GitHub interface, but the extra time from just making a code change to creating a branch and pushing it and opening a pull request, and then, it is often a lot harder than, for example, in a Google Doc, you just edit it directly or select, suggest, edit, enter, that's it. And GitHub, it has an inline, an online editor for minor tweaks, but it's also only for quick typos or quick fixes.
Mm-hmm.
So I think a lot of it is just limitations of, the whole Git model where you have have to create branches and wrangle with rebasing and stuff like that.
Okay, and if there's somebody watching this who would like to contribute or who is thinking of it, where would you say they could make the most impactful contribution right now?
Most impactful?
Yeah.
Or because
I know a lot of people, they when they make a contribution, it usually starts with their problems, their issues, things that they need to solve that haven't been solved. But then at some point, some people say, how can I, really do something useful, that's not just for me, but for the project? Where would be the most impactful contributions right now?
I don't know. I think following your own or people from, your buddies, people you speak in the community, just looking at those issues, I think that's a good start, or just a good approach in general, because if there's just if someone raises an issue, it could be just their very niche corner case.
Mm-hmm.
But if there's multiple people or you yourself. You can trust your own judgment. And you can be like, oh, well, I encountered this. I'm not doing something weird. I bet that other people have run into this as well. That's what I noticed with my own issues. That sometimes I make a mistake and then later I see in the forum, oh, someone else makes this mistake as well. So it's probably a common issue worth fixing. And it's hard to say like what issue needs fixing now that isn't in your own direct interest. And I also think if you start working on that, you'll be less motivated. I think if you just fix your issues you're passionate about or you care about, I think that's really great. You don't have to, ask us for the most effective issue. It's also because we would probably give you a very hard, long-standing issue that you cannot just solve, because those are, if it's an easy issue, it probably has been solved. So we'll give you like the long-standing dual context bug. Like, oh, that would be great, but yeah, it's also really
That's why it's still open.
Yeah. So I'd probably just start with what issues you care about, and also issues you can solve. Like if you're not very experienced, start with improving error messages. Is often a low barrier thing to do. And if you want to improve, I don't know, template instantiation, that's probably a lot harder. So yeah.
All right, Dennis, I think we can start winding things down now. And I guess to send us off, do you have any parting thoughts for the viewers?
No, not really.
Nothing? No words of wisdom? No.
Let me think for a while. Yeah, I would say really just try. Don't be afraid that something, oh, this issue or this thing is too hard for me. I cannot grasp it. I have to wait for someone else to save the day. Often if you have something you think, you want to see changed, just give it a shot, see how far you come, and often you'll be surprised with how far you can come, even though at the beginning it seems like a daunting task. So and just try making a contribution that you care about, and see how far you get. And if you fail, you still learn something. So yeah, I recommend doing that.
All right. Are you planning to submit a talk for DConf in September?
Definitely.
All right.
I'm thinking of 2 possible talks now, but I'm thinking whether I should have like 2 short talks, submit 2 short talks or 1 big talk. So, but I will submit something.
Okay, cool. And I'm really looking forward to. I've already got my trip booked, almost completely. I'm ready to go. So, Dennis, thanks for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
No problem. And I will see you at our next meeting. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye.